We've got quite the dynamic of energy to talk about this week with the full moon in Leo and the headline that maybe we don't really want to talk about, the first Mercury retrograde of 2021. This year, they're all happening in the air signs. So we'll talk about ways to navigate the energies around this full moon, which is stormy for some of the signs, and where the energy heads next after that as we go into this first Merc Ret phase. So here are the headlines. This full moon in Leo is already starting to pick up for everybody, really. But what we're talking about at the onset of this full moon is quite the mixture of energies, which is typically the case. But Uranus is involved, and that can be a little bit stormy, especially in this tense square that's happening with the sun and the moon. We're seeing Uranus give us this pressure and upheaval vibration that really hasn't gone away. We've been talking about Uranus for most of the month as that planet has stationed direct now in Taurus, providing us with progressive upheavals, where we're looking to break into these new areas, So we're still talking about that this week, but you could call it I guess, a crisis point of sorts on a microcosm and a macrocosm. So we can look at that in our own life as being like, where's this point where if there's like tectonic plates, where's the fault line moving? Like where am I needing to release this energy, on a personal level this week to work with the full moon. It's all about expansion too, because Jupiter is conjunct the sun at this full moon as well. And when you see a lot of kind of like tension involved, it's really nice to see Jupiter, who is the great benefactor, involved in the equation, because that's sort of adds an amount of protection and good naturedness to the whole situation. So we can find the humor in it too, but we can also keep remembering that this is a growth process. Jupiter represents growth and expansion. So it's not just storms for storm's sake. It's asking us to make these expansive upgrades. And, it's uncomfortable. We talk about that with Uranus, how it's outside of our comfort zone, which is Saturn. It's those boundaries and those old structures. And even though we might not have liked some of them, they're still, in a way, felt safe, because it's what we're used to, or because it's like what we're counting on. And when those things start to move or shift around, it can be very uncomfortable, especially for signs like Taurus, where this is all happening. Getting that kind of shakeup that can happen with Uranus energy, where the status quo really has a hard time, with Uranus. It's all about the new and the unfamiliar. So the signs that are typically more fiery or impulsive, having a great time with Uranus, making some big leaps here. A lot can happen in a day with this kind of energy. But the fixed signs, Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius, you are in a line for these. I would call them scattered thunderstorms, astrologically, as we're heading into this full moon. So we're asking ourselves, what is the guidance of this energy that could lead me into the unfamiliar, that could be exciting. The Uranus is this like electrical feel, almost like a literal thunderstorm. So where is this electricity wanting to happen for you? Where can you make this connection, right? Because a lightning bolt requires two sides of electricity, right? And then there's this connection, and then everything happens, right? So that's why with Uranus, a lot can happen in a short amount of time, right? It's that's also why it doesn't really make sense. Sometimes these things that come up, we're like feeling frustrated or feeling pressure, or quick changes or differences of direction, but then later on we see how it didn't really fit in our linear thought process, these events or these things. That's why we sort of have to do a little more listening with Uranus, watching for those clues where we're feeling that electricity, and then how to use it. Are we going to feel like we're in a thunderstorm, or are we going to feel electrified, by it to do the thing, and Jupiter would come in and be like, let's go for it, or let's, make a fun move toward this electrical feeling vibration, rather than, the opposite of that would be heightened anxieties, people feeling that electrical anxiousness that can happen sometimes when we're getting these changes. So remembering to do the grounding, the Taurus is all about grounding. What makes you comfortable? What are some times you can take out of the day when you're doing these, radical or unfamiliar activities that are things that are familiar to you? Things that you can sort of count on, meals or relaxed times, things like that, to sort of like find a little bit of balance with that very expressive and boisterous energy that we have this week, because the full moon is in Leo, and that is the sign of expression. So another way you could work with this energy, especially for those fixed signs, Taurus, Leo, Aquarius, and Scorpio, is to, but for everybody really, is to look at your sun sign, the very basics. What is the sign you read when you look at the horoscopes? Your sun sign, your rising sign, that is your sun. That is your core essence, right? And so when the sun, like right now, is in this hard angle with Uranus, it's asking us to really break into that core essence and upgrade that expression of that sign. So if you're a Taurus, channel Taurus. How can you go a step with that? If you're a Gemini, take that Gemini energy and run with it. You know what I mean? And so Aries and Libra are actually in a pretty good angle with this full moon, because we've got a fire and air thing going on, and they're not in line for this other thing that's happening with the mutable signs. Gemini, Virgo, Pisces, and Sagittarius, because Neptune is doing this karmic thing this week for those signs, which is really asking us all to make decisions to move forward into new healthy decisions and healthy processes, because Neptune can be dissociation and escapism as much as it can be alternative healing arts, or even performance art, putting on different colors or different looks. And that's why this works kind of perfectly with the Leo full moon, because Leo is about expression and all the time the looks, the sparkly things, the glamorousness, and Neptune being glamour and movies and performances and getting into character and that kind of thing. We could really channel some of that energy this week to move toward a more future-oriented vibe and make it practical. Gemini is like the practical nature of things. So let's make it real. Let's be like, okay, well, here's your dream, or here's your thing you're wanting to explore. What's the first step, or like a practical step you could take to actually work with it? Some Gemini wisdom is like, if you don't have the thing, the instructions say, well, what else can we use for it? How can we get this done? So not saying that we're getting everything done this week. It's just about those decisions on how to work with our dreams and our imagination and this Neptune energy. Or are we sort of swimming off and swimming away from it and avoiding the situation or the topic? Because that would be Pisces, where we're like, oh, well, I'll just go over here and do this other thing for a while and come back to it. And if we're doing that, that's great. That's fine. We'll have a chance to come back to that, because we have the first Mercury retrograde of the year also starting this week at the end of the week. And that's our time when we'd make these adjustments and realignments in our life. It's when everything doesn't necessarily halt, but we kind of like look in the rearview mirror a little bit. We're like, okay, like let's go back over these things. Let's do some editing. Let's put some more energy into these reinventions we've been making with Aquarius. So in this case, it can sort of be like the universe giving us like a moment to breathe. A lot of times Mercury retrograde, we give a very hard time because, on the practical level, it's typically not the best for like travel plans or big agreements or purchases or that kind of thing. But this time, with everything that's been happening, one thing after another, it almost feels like, thank you, thank you. Like, we need a second. you know. So let's look at the calendar here and talk about the daily energies. You can see how this Sun and Uranus thing is happening before the full moon, which is on Thursday. And same thing with the Neptune thing. So after Tuesday, we're going to be seeing Neptune, which is also the planet of medicines and healing arts and that kind of thing, closer to the North Node than the South Node, which is future rather than past. So we can hopefully, on a collective level, see a little more progressive push or energy into the health fields and to this positive, progressive version of Neptune, and see a little more, future oriented decisions being made there, so it doesn't feel so like could go one way or the other kind of thing, because that's what happens when we get a square to the nodes. We make a decision to move on, you know. And so Venus conjunct Pluto at this full moon is also another thing that wasn't in on the headline page. And this is a very powerful feminine energy. This is asking us where we're channeling our feminine empowerment, which a lot of times with Venus is what will we allow in our life? What kind of relationships do we really want to be in? And how are we feeling about those right now? Pluto is about empowerment. And with Venus, she is like, get it, girl. Like, go for it, queen. You know what I mean? Like a very empowered, feminine, sort of in charge energy. But in a low vibration, she can also signal some sort of like jealousy vibes. She can signal some like clinginess or talking about like taboos. She can be a little shady sometimes with Pluto involved. So we want to steer away from that energy and be like, where am I feeling empowered, rather than disempowered in my friendships and in my relationships. Some people with this energy could be seeing events that are more of the sobering or sad or transformative nature occur with relationships this week, especially since we have this Neptune square going on, which can often dissolve things. So if you are a Gemini, Sagittarius, Virgo, or Pisces, you might still be ending some of these soul contracts that have been happening as we transition into this new energy. So just be aware you could be dealing with some deeper topics than just regular full moon stuff. So we've got the Mercury retrograde here that happens on Friday. 10:40 p.m. is the exact time of the switchover, but we're feeling it already at the full moon. This goes for 3 weeks until February 20th in the sign of Aquarius. And so this begins our time of Mercury retrograde experiences. They're the strongest at the beginning and the end of the period. So that goes for anything like those delays we talk about. Double check to make sure you have all your keys, your belongings, those little trivial things. And it's just something that happens. People say like those things happen all the time, and that's true. But Mercury retrograde does happen 3 times a year for 3 weeks at a time. It's sort of like a pattern, and you can actually sort of map these things out. So Aquarius, this time you're getting your turn to make these alignments. Pay attention to what happens around the beginning of this period, because it can let you know sort of what you're working with. You don't have to rush through it, but also consider bringing things back on the table that you want to add more energy to that we haven't really had a chance to because of all of this sort of like rushing or sudden leaps and sudden halts kind of energy we've been dealing with the last few weeks. So this is like more of a cruise on in process, and especially Aquarius too. You got Venus moving into your sign at the beginning of next week to really help with the beauty and of things and your relationships and that kind of stuff. So next update, we'll talk about what goes on there. And if you want to help support these videos, you can send me a tip. The addresses are on the screen there, or subscribe monthly to my Patreon. All that can be taken care of at my website too, which the link is in the bio. It's astrologywithcumulus.com. Stay tuned for the YouTube version for this The YouTube version of this video will have a second section on what your sign and rising sign could experience at this full moon, with a little more clue onto how to guide the energy. For a little more detail on where your sign or rising sign could be guiding the energies at this full moon, we'll look at you and your opposite sign together, because that's what happens at full moons. We've got the sun and the moon opposite each other, and this time with Uranus involved, asking us to make these shifts or find out where this sort of pressure is. So we'll start with Leo, because the full moon is in your sign. The Leo and Aquarius opposites, dealing with independence and partnership. We're talking about who you really want to attract in your life. We're talking about upgrading that. We're also talking about how this could affect your home and career line. The very important parts of your life are going through a big shift right now. So you two signs are definitely in a line to be feeling all the things at this full moon, and will appreciate the Mercury retrograde that comes up, because it will allow you to review everything that has happened over the last month or so, and make these decisions on how to move forward independently, what you're looking for in the realm of other people you're involved with, but also how this relates to upgrades you're feeling for your home and for your career, your whole trajectory in life as we go into this age of Aquarius kind of vibration. So it's probably the most significant for you two signs. For your counterparts, Scorpio and Taurus, you both are in that fixed sign alignment too, where we're feeling those thunderstorms, Scorpio and Taurus. So you've got to be willing to sort of roll with it at this full moon and take a look at those challenges if you're feeling them, and meet that electricity with that. Find that excitement, plug into it, and work with that Uranus energy for something that could be unexpected, or ways things could work out that you might not have thought of before. Sagittarius and Gemini, you're dealing with the Neptune weather at this full moon, but we're talking about travel for you, and we're talking about your agreements, your communications. So you're the signs, Sagittarius and Gemini, who could watch out more for the Mercury retrograde kind of events, because we've got some illumination happening for you involving travel, or involving things you've been writing or publishing. It could be a good time to finish those things if you've got any of those projects happening before you enter the Mercury retrograde phase. But it would be a little too late for any kind of launches or publishing moments, unless you want to add more energy to it later on. For Virgo and Pisces, we're dealing with work stuff. Let's think about the daily routines, the daily job. And since Neptune is happening for you too, this is this planet of health routines. How are we making sure to stay on track? Are we kind of consistently swimming off track? These signs are opposite in the realm of practicality and driftiness. And so both of you need to work with this balance of having the medicinal time to do your meditations and things like that with Neptune, but also being practical and organizing time for the real healthy routines. Not that meditation isn't healthy, but the typical, what Pisces might consider boring health routines, or things like that to get involved in, because it's your choice right now karmically on the healthy patterns that you invite into your life. And the energy's there for you to adjust any type of addictive situations, or substance kinds of situations, or even psychological mental health awareness kinds of things with you or other people. The energy's there for you to really move forward in that sense into some new imagination vibes, rather than dealing with that past karma stuff. So you could use this full moon to finish up your karmic ties and that kind of thing, if you've still been working on that kind of stuff. Aries and Libra signs experiencing the best energy at this full moon, actually, because you're not in either of those sort of stormy activations taking place. So you can really enjoy this full moon and connect the dots on your creative expression, because we're talking Leo. So we're talking about how are you wanting to be uniquely you express your own individuality to the world. And how does that fit into the collective? Aquarius is collective, Leo is individual. So Aries and Libra, how are you working with this balance of your own sign, independence versus partnership work, but also this self-expression, and how that fits into the community? Are you plugging that in, kind of thing? And you can notice the most benefits from this full moon than any of the other signs, as well as the upcoming Mercury retrograde. You will probably enjoy the breather, especially because over the whole last year, your signs, Aries, Libra, with also your friends Cancer and Capricorn, were dealing with a lot of this transformation. So look at it as a blessing and enjoy the breather. Cancer and Capricorn, then you two are both also dealing with healing this what we're letting go of, from the last cycles. And a lot of this partnership stuff might be pertaining to you because Venus and Pluto are conjunct in Capricorn, which is activating your axis. So that empowering of the feminine, that feeling of empowering friendships and connections applies most to you, Cancer and Capricorn, because you've been through so much. It's time for you to not take the old stuff anymore. It's time for you to be like, okay, where do I feel held up? Where are people clapping for me? Where am I feeling less of this sort of tricky behind the scenes, sort of maybe manipulative or jealous or clingy kind of vibration? My screen just did a weird thing for you on that, Capricorn and Cancer. So I'm sending you love and empowerment for this full moon to make progressive decisions, about moving forward and what we want to look into for this review time for Mercury retrograde. So that's it for your sign details. We will talk next week. Hopefully on Sunday. I'm going to start making the weekly videos available for you on Sunday. And then got some other fun additions to add. One of them is a Zodiac Minute horoscope thing I've been posting on TikTok. I'm going to start compiling them and putting them here on the YouTube channel if you want to scroll through those and get a quick little 1-minute uplifter with a tarot card. Those will be there for you. And then I'll be starting also a new podcast, which will be an in-depth look at the upcoming astrology. So something sort of on either side of this video format, a really short and fun kind of blip version. You'll have this to look forward to every week, and then you'll have a monthly, every time we get into a new zodiac season, a podcast that will be, an in-depth kind of informative, kind of astro nerd talk kind of thing. So to help support with any of that, you can send those tips to Venmo or Cash App or subscribe monthly on my Patreon. The names are on the screen there, or you can go to the link in the bio and do everything from my website, which is astrologywithcumulus.com. All right. Love you. See you next week.